the last several weeks, coronavirus has dominated social media and our news cycles. We are all doing our part to prevent the spread of this virus through the lockdown, but the current prevention methods are limited in their effectiveness. Meanwhile, world economies are suffering, unemployment is sky high, and the stock market has had wild swings of unpredictability, and hundreds of thousands of people have died around the world. Who could have predicted a disaster of this magnitude? As it turns out, one company did. Blue Dot is a Canadian artificial intelligence company that sounded the alarm back in December 2019, before the disease had even been spotted outside of China. So how did they get ahead of the curve? Blue Dot's story begins far before the current COVID-19 outbreak. In fact, it started during another outbreak, the SARS epidemic of 2003. The 2003 SARS virus also originated in China, but ultimately spread to Hong Kong and Toronto and killed approximately 44 people in Toronto. At the time, Dr. Cameron Khan was working as an infectious disease specialist at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. There, he witnessed the carnage firsthand and decided he wanted to prevent the next outbreak. He went to work creating several predictive algorithms to see which ones were most effective. In 2014, with the aid of $9.4 million in venture capital funding, he founded Blue Dot. The company has since grown to 40 employees, a combination of infectious disease physicians and artificial intelligence programmers. Okay, let's take a step back and break down fundamentally what artificial intelligence is all about. Simply put, artificial intelligence, also referred to as AI, makes it possible for machines to perform human-like tasks. In order to do this, the machine learns by processing vast amounts of data and recognizing patterns in the data that help it learn, make conclusions, or take action. Some examples of AI in action include machines playing chess to self-driving cars, which rely heavily on more complex learning models with various types of specialisms such as deep learning, language processing, and computer vision. So with Blue Dot, their aim is to prevent future pandemics by monitoring worldwide news reports, government statements, and animal and plant disease networks.
And this is information that's coming from our colleagues that are working in the infectious disease surveillance world. And what they're doing is they're monitoring news of infectious disease events, or listening, if you will, to chatter on the internet about infectious diseases, and doing so in multiple different languages.
Based on these reports, they warn their clients about danger zones like Wuhan, the city in China where COVID-19 originated. These clients include public health officials in several countries, including the US and Canada. They also include hospitals and travel companies such as airlines. At this time, Blue Dot services are not available to the general public, but Dr. Khan says they do have plans for that in the future. Now that would be amazing. So how does Blue Dot sift through all of this data? There are two components to this process. The first is machine learning. So step back in time to 2003, during the SARS outbreak, to today. We can perform effective machine learning on that data set because we have a lot of data on this past outbreak to work with. As you can imagine, there are different types of data, from written to speech and sound, images, and so on. By testing different methods of parsing that data, a machine learning system can, with a much higher volume of data, come up with much smarter predictive algorithms than a human engineer could. Another AI advancement that Blue Dot uses is called natural language processing, or NLP for short. NLP means that a computer understands speech the way it's actually used. When people actually speak or write, they don't always use perfect grammar. Moreover, different words can mean different things in different contexts. One example Dr. Khan cites is anthrax. In one interview, he said they needed their algorithm to understand whether this is an outbreak of anthrax in Mongolia versus a reunion of the heavy metal band Anthrax. With NLP, Blue Dot is able to analyze data from over 65 countries. Their AI uses sentiment analysis along with NLP to look for possible new disease hotspots. Sentiment analysis, also known as opinion mining, is a technique that's used by many companies, usually to track how customers feel about certain products or services, a sort of emotional classification which could be described at the most basic level as positive or negative. It relies on computational linguistics and biometrics to identify, quantify, and understand the data. For example, a headphone manufacturer could use sentiment analysis on influencer blogs to find out whether or not their customers like the sound quality of their new device. For an infectious disease AI, sentiment analysis can help determine how concerned people are when they're writing a report. Once all of this has been done, the process moves from Blue Dot's engineers to their disease experts. Their epidemiologists check the AI's predictions against what they know about science and disease spread. If they determine that there's a threat, Blue Dot goes on to warn their customers about a potential outbreak. Based on local reporting of a cluster of unusual pneumonia cases happening around a market in Wuhan, China, Blue Dot's AI flagged and correctly predicted a disease outbreak in Wuhan. It didn't at the time yet understand the magnitude of what the AI was reporting, and that it would later be identified as the COVID-19 virus. Their algorithm also correctly predicted that the disease would spread first to Taipei, Tokyo, Seoul, and Bangkok. They achieved this with global airline ticketing data, which told them where most people would be traveling to. All of this was before the US Center for Disease Control, which did not give any warnings until January 6, 2020. It was even faster than the World Health Organization, which did not issue an alert until January 9, 2020. How were they able to achieve this? Dr. Khan explained in an interview with Wired.com. We know that governments may not be relied upon to provide information in a timely fashion. We can pick up news of possible outbreaks, little murmurs or forums or blogs of indications of some kind of unusual events going on. If you've been watching the news, you've already been aware that some governments responded faster than others to the coronavirus outbreak. Perhaps the fastest country to respond was Taiwan. Taiwan is an island nation located only 81 miles from mainland China. Because of close cultural and economic ties between the two countries, there is a lot of travel between the two. In fact, out of Taiwan's 23 million citizens, 850,000 live in China and 404,000 work there. In addition, in 2019 alone, over 2.7 million Chinese citizens visited Taiwan. Because of this, Taiwan has constantly been vigilant of possible disease outbreaks in China, especially since the 2003 SARS outbreak. As it happens, COVID-19 first appeared just before the Lunar New Year. This is the biggest holiday in Chinese culture, a time when families in mainland China and Taiwan reunite to celebrate. In fact, it's the largest human migration on Earth. Imagine Thanksgiving weekend, but with 4 times as many people traveling. Taiwan's digital minister, Audrey Tang, was quick to respond. Tang got her first start as a computer hacker and has since moved over to public service. Using AI, her ministry mapped the spread of COVID-19 and created a system of digital alerts to send text messages to citizens in high-risk areas. The reason Taiwan was able to do this is that they have an official national health insurance database.
It's about open government, meaning that the government should trust the citizens with open data, not asking citizens to blindly trust the government.
They integrated this database with their immigration and customs database to create a data set for their AI to analyze. That's a ton of data. They could then determine, for instance, people who had arrived from Wuhan within the past 14 days and advise them to self-quarantine. They could also identify who had contacted these people and advise them to self-isolate as well. Using digital alerts, they even notified citizens in potential hotspots that they should buy masks. They achieved all of this within just a few days before the US government even issued any warnings. The minister also personally created a digital app that allows citizens to get data on PPE supplies in real time.
So recently, in light of the coronavirus outbreak, I have personally created an app, a simple web page that shows all the more than 70 now applications that shows how each pharmacies have the surgical mask left. I think one of the main contributions is that it really makes everybody feel much more secure on the supply and the demand of the mask.
This smart data-based approach was an incredible success. Despite the large number of people traveling to and from mainland China, Taiwan only has 428 confirmed coronavirus cases as of April the 24th, 2020. Contrast this with mainland China, which shut down a third of the country and ordered everyone to remain in their homes, and still ended up with 84,311 confirmed cases. Some have speculated it's possible that the real number is significantly higher. Admittedly, China's efforts were successful, but that success came at a much higher cost than Taiwan's. In the States, Marco Lopez de Prado, who's been building machine learning algorithms that help predict movement in the stock market for some of the biggest money managers, including Guggenheim Partners and AQR Capital Management, has now applied those big data skills to the current pandemic outbreak. He teamed up with an academic to propose a method to simulate more targeted lockdowns by breaking the population into different groups. Marco says it's an effort that's all the more needed given the data crisis slowing down the pandemic response. But what if AI could predict an outbreak even earlier? For example, what if AI could actually predict the next deadly virus before it even appeared? Scientists at the University of Hong Kong and the Mayo Clinic are doing some promising research in that direction. Professors Hunch Son and Zhongwen Wang are developing a machine learning approach to predict mutations in wild viruses that might cause a disease. Their methods work by tracking the different metal ions in human cells. These metals are necessary for all living creatures, but their concentrations have to fall within specific levels. Too much zinc, iron, or copper, and you can get sick. Too little, and the same thing will happen. By tracking mutations in living people, they're able to predict different diseases, particularly autoimmune diseases. But this is only part of the research that needs to be done. Doctors at BCM Bioinformatics recently published a paper where they used a similar practice to predict mutations in the HIV virus. Once again, they used machine learning to perform their research. HIV is one of the most studied viruses in existence, and its various mutations have all been tracked for decades. Because of this, the doctors were able to build a large, robust data set for their machine to learn from. By analyzing amino acid and nucleotide sequence changes over time, they can now predict future mutations in the wild. While this research is still in its early stages, it could be a game changer for tracking infectious disease. If it pans out, we could end up seeing similar programs for predicting coronavirus mutations. One of the biggest players in public health is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Indeed, they're currently the largest donor to the World Health Organization, providing more annual funding than any world government. And Bill Gates has been vocal about the risk of a pandemic virus. In 2015, in the aftermath of the West African Ebola outbreak, Bill Gates gave a TED Talk where he said,
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes.
Gates took the analogy even further, pointing out that countries have been working for decades to prevent nuclear war but that very few resources have been dedicated to preventing an epidemic. He pointed out that there were too few epidemiologists working on tracking viruses in the world. He also pointed out that many countries still don't keep digital records, which makes it difficult to create a digital database for tracking disease. He suggested that the Ebola outbreak was a harbinger of things to come, and that if it hadn't been confined to rural areas, it could have gotten much worse. Ebola was also contained because it's less contagious than an airborne flu-like virus. During his talk, Gates said that a virus like the Spanish flu of 1918, which was responsible for over 50 million deaths, more than the carnage of even World War I, could turn into a pandemic before governments had a chance to respond. In this case, he predicted that over 30 million people could die from such a disease. The Gates Foundation has primarily been invested in preventing malaria outbreaks in Africa. However, they've also been involved in AI research. Unlike Blue Dot though, the Gates Foundation has been focused on using AI as a curative measure rather than a preventative one. In recent keynote speech address for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, Gates said,
We have an opportunity with the advance of tools like artificial intelligence and gene-based editing technologies to build this new generation of health solutions so that they are available to everyone on the planet. And I'm very excited about this.
Needless to say, this might not prevent the next outbreak, but Gates AI might help us develop treatments. So what does this mean for us going forward? The twin examples of Taiwan and China provide a promising guide. In China, geographic analysis was largely successful, but it was incredibly expensive and damaging to the economy. Moreover, the draconian nature of the lockdown measures are not something that most people would be willing to accept, and not for very long anyway. Taiwan perhaps provides a faster, more preemptive response. With the use of AI and contact tracing, they were able to achieve significantly lower infection rates with minimal disruption to everyday life. As citizens of Western countries willing to accept some privacy trade-offs in order to better manage future pandemics? That's a question that will be decided over the next several years, and an interesting argument for the concept of open data governance. Let me know in the comments actually if you'd like to see how AI can transform governance. And so the million-dollar question is, what AI will bring us in the future? With predictive analysis of mutations, will we get to the point where we can preempt the next pandemic before it even begins? Or will we simply improve our self-containment ability with laser precision and speed? Only time will tell. So what fascinates you about AI? What are your predictions for how AI will affect our world and health? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and share, and give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it too. Till then, stay curious, stay learning.